Hey guys, imagine waking up tomorrow to a world without fire. That's right. No hot breakfast, no spark to keep your cave cozy, and definitely no way to safely roast that mysterious meat you've somehow managed to hunt. Suddenly, you'd be the kind of person who's way too eager to make friends with that stick or stone. Because honestly, those are your new best bets for survival. Before we dive into what life was really like in prehistoric times, hit like if you've ever struggled just lighting a candle, and let me know in the comments, would you survive a day without fire? Or would you just starve and shiver? Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's uncover why fire was basically prehistoric humanity's secret superpower. In the quiet hush of a wooded valley, Aki, a hunter-gatherer with tired eyes, wandered near a low-lying bush where a faint glow caught his attention, something warm and flickering amidst the fallen leaves. Curiosity, or perhaps a restless urge for novelty, stirred within him as he reached out and gently brushed aside the small embers smoldering in the cool dusk. His fingers, rough and calloused, felt the subtle heat, an odd comfort amidst the fading daylight. Around him, the others went about their routines, unaware of the quiet discovery unfolding, as if the world was subtly holding its breath. That moment of gentle ignition, fragile and unassuming, became the seed of something unseen, an early whisper of connection in the shared experience of a small, flickering flame. As night deepened, Aki's tribe gathered closer, drawn by the glow that now seemed to pulse softly in the chilly air. The flicker cast shifting shadows on their faces, some wary, others curious, as they hesitated just a little longer each time they reached out with a hesitant hand or a cautious whisper. A symphony of small sounds arose, a crackling, the drip of evening dew, quiet footsteps, each echo a reminder of their tentative step into shared understanding. The embers' warmth became oddly soothing, a gentle tension hanging between fear of the unknown and the comfort of proximity. Silence grew thick, punctuated only by muffled murmurs and the soft rustling of clothing, as they, for once, paused from their endless hunt or gathering to simply watch and wonder together. That irony, the way the smallest spark could inspire a collective pause, began to settle in. Some tribe members cast cautious glances toward each other, the corners of their mouths twitching into faint, uncertain smiles. Aki, ever so slightly embarrassed by the attention, looked away, as if the ember's glow had betrayed his simple discovery. Slowly, out of a mix of trepidation and curiosity, they fumbled with stones and dried leaves near the fire, attempting to stoke it, to keep the warmth alive. The shared effort, clumsy and imperfect, offered a strange solace, as if even their awkward attempts at control brought them closer in quiet camaraderie. It was as if, without meaning to, they had woven a fragile link, a thread of social fabric pulled tight by flickering light and shared breath. Over time, the fire's gentle glow became a familiar companion in the long, still evenings. Shadows softened, and human faces carried the gentle weariness of a day's labor. Yet they lingered near the flickering heart of their small gathering. Conversations drifted, slow and understated, about hunting paths or the weather, as if the fire encouraged patience and common sense in the chaos of their daily lives. The ember's quiet resilience seemed to whisper that this simple act of gathering could be enough, an understated act of community that needed no grand rituals. They learned, perhaps unconsciously, that it was in these small shared moments, in passing days and flickering nights, that their bonds gently grew. The ember, long burned down, left behind a silent reminder that warmth and connection can start in the least dramatic way. Now, in their sleep-dappled valley, the memory of the ember lingers like a subtle poetry, an ordinary miracle of human nature. The tribe's quiet thanks is a body language of relaxed shoulders and slow, intentional breaths as they lean into the ebb of night's calm. They may never fully grasp the extent of their own small revolution, but the story of that first spark persists in the gentle rhythm of their lives. Aki's discovery, unremarkable in its simplicity, reminds us how a tiny flicker of warmth can shape a community, an understated step in the slow, ongoing dance of human connection, carried softly across generations. Beneath the weight of history, it remains just a quiet, ordinary beginning, ending, perhaps, where it always does, in the gentle surrender of the day to night, and the silent power of something barely noticed. In the quiet hours of a chilly dawn, the tribe's hearth had long been the center of their world. Smoke curled lazily into the air, and the flickering glow promised warmth and sustenance. It was a rhythm they had known for generations. The gentle crackle of burning would a familiar comfort. But on this morning, an unexpected cold snap swept through the valley, and the fire's soft glow was abruptly snuffed out, leaving only shadows and silence. The people stared at the empty hearth, a strange heaviness settling in as the cold started to bite through their skins and bones, whispering of vulnerability they had never expected to face. Somewhere beneath their calm veneer, a quiet realization dawned. Without fire, every small act became a struggle, and comfort was just a fragile illusion. As the hours passed, frostbite and cold-related pains crept into the limbs that once moved with ease, fingers numb, noses red, cheeks raw with wind. The women wrapped themselves tighter in animal pelts. The men paced slowly, trying to start a new fire with trembling hands, but the sparks refused to catch. The food stored beneath the earth grew harder to chew, and hunger's slow creep became more insistent, gnawing at the edges of both stomach and spirit. Outside, shadows of wolves prowled closer, their rustling breathing unnatural in the stillness. The tribe's confidence, once rooted in their mastery over fire, now hung like a fragile icicle, ready to melt under the weight of the cold they could not escape. Irony settled in as they watched a young scout, eager yet inexperienced, attempt to rekindle a fire by rubbing stones together, an age-old skill, only to reveal how little they truly understood what they relied on. The animals that once kept their distance approached cautiously, their eyes hollow, perhaps sensing the unraveling. The elders, faces blurred by the smoky haze of memory, silently questioned how swiftly life had shifted from warmth and safety to this quiet, aching endurance. Every breath seemed slower now, each moment stretched out like a tired yawn, the stark reality that survival depended on a simple, often overlooked element sinking in further. The thin moonlight cast long, empty shadows on the ground, emphasizing what was lost in a moment's cold silence. Eventually, calm returned, not with a blaze, but with a resigned acceptance. The tribe settled closer, sharing their meager resources, their breaths creating tiny clouds in the frigid air. They spoke softly, their voices almost merging with the whisper of the wind, acknowledging how vulnerable they truly were without the fire's embrace. The cooking, once taken for granted, was replaced with raw, unprocessed bites, bitter on the tongue. Sleep came slowly, wrapped in animal pelts, each member aware of the fragile boundary between warmth and deadly cold. In this quiet space, amidst their shared discomfort, a subtle realization emerged. Life's delicate balance depended on small, everyday acts, often unnoticed, like tending a flame. They drifted into a sleepy, contemplative silence, mindfully aware of how easily comfort can slip away. Looking back, the tribe's experience became a muted lesson in humility, a reminder that even in their timeless existence, dependence on fire was woven into their fabric. Their faces, blurred by shadows and memory, reflected a quiet humility. No prophets, no grand proclamations, just the soft acknowledgement that survival was often about patience and simple resilience. The cold persisted outside their small circle, but within, a small wasp-like thrill of renewed appreciation for the warmth they once took for granted whispered quietly. Perhaps, in the slow, mundane truth of it all, human life is held together not by grand acts, but by small, nearly invisible moments of care, like building a fire or waiting for dawn to come again. And as the night stretched on, the world outside remained unchanged, patiently waiting for the sun's gentle return. In the gentle light of dawn, the tribe gathers around the quiet fire pit, the air still tinged with the coolness of early morning. A hunter, shoulders relaxed, but eyes alert, returns from the woods dragging behind him a massive elk, its horns like a heavy crown. There's a subtle sense of accomplishment in the air, mingled with the familiarity of work and wait. Yet, as the warmth of the day unfolds, the reality of their situation begins to seep in without fire. The large pieces of meat sit damp and heavy, starting to sweat in the cool shade. The simple act of bringing down such a prize feels almost like a fragile victory, quietly tinged with the knowledge of hardship ahead. As the sun climbs higher, the tribe attempts to process the carcass, breaking open the thick hide with simple stones and scraping the meat with dull tools. The smell begins to change damp and rich, slowly giving way to a more pungent odor as the flesh cools and moisture seeps out. In the shadows nearby, the scavengers, crows, foxes, and unwelcome guests begin to creep closer, their eyes gleaming with patience and hunger. A few young members watch anxiously, glancing at the rotting meat, murmuring quietly about how everything is more difficult without fire. The danger from below and above grows quietly, a reminder that survival is a fragile balance, especially without the simple, warming presence of fire's glow. Irony creeps in as the tribe, who once celebrated the hunt, now faces the cold reality that their efforts are undermined by the absence of flames. The meat, once a symbol of success, becomes an object of quiet despair, its preservation impossible without heat, and its smell a beacon to scavengers more than a bounty. They observe in muted silence as a fox slinks close, nose working vigorously, unbothered by their presence. The elders, their faces blurred in the shadows, exchange looks that say little but carry a weight of shared understanding. They realize that fire is not just a tool, but a safeguard, an invisible wall that keeps death at bay and preserves the uncertain thread of trust they have in their own efforts. As afternoon gives way to evening, the tribe slowly retreats, turning their attention to smaller fires in hidden hollows and used sparingly. They settle into the quiet rhythm of waiting, their faces softly lit by the occasional flicker of a tiny flame. The air feels warmer now, despite the chill, as they recognize the calm that comes with acceptance, acknowledging the unpredictable dance of nature and human fragility. Their movements are deliberate, careful. They seem to move through this moment as if predicting the slow, inevitable need for fire's return. In these silent moments, they are both exhausted and quietly resolute, knowing that fire holds not just warmth, but their very hope for survival. Later, As darkness settles over the land, the tribe sits near a small, crackling ember, watching the faint glow breathe life into the night. They reflect quietly, perhaps imagining fires long past or dreaming of brighter days where warmth and preservation were a natural part of daily life. The faces, though worn and blurred by memory, seem somehow restful, aware of how fragile their existence truly is, yet finding comfort in this shared stillness. They understand, without words, that fire is more than a tool. It is a silent guardian against decay, against despair, and perhaps against forgetting their place in the slow, unending flow of time. The night drifts on, understated and calm, much like their quiet pursuit of survival. In the gentle glow of early evening, a small group of humans sat quietly around their flickering fire, its warmth radiating softly onto their faces. The flames, fragile yet vital, seemed to embody a quiet certainty. They knew their survival depended on this small, dancing light. Their daily routines revolved around gathering wood, feeding the fire, and watching it calmly smolder into the night. It was a small but essential ritual, a familiar rhythm that made the world feel a little less vast and uncertain. In these moments, human life was measured by sparks and shadows, an ongoing dialogue with the quiet heat that kept them alive. One day, the peace was broken when distant figures appeared on the horizon, a rival clan, seeking the control of the fire's precious warmth and light. As they approached, the air thickened with the tension of fragile alliances and old grudges. Cold stones and sharp words replaced the simple warmth of shared fire, and soon the sound of footsteps and hushed threats filled the air. Without warning, the clash erupted, a tumult of hurried gestures, clashing stones and shouts. In the chaos, the original fire was threatened, its gentle glow flickering dangerously as bodies fought to claim its warmth, risking destruction for the sake of conquest. Ironically, the fierce struggle over fire, something often seen as sacred, became a weapon in itself. Flammable materials were snatched as weapons. Flames were thrown to intimidate or disarm. The once peaceful glow was now a weapon wielded with reckless abandon, illuminating the violence of human rivalry. As sparks flew and smoke thickened, it was clear that fire, so vital for life, was also a fragile thing, easily lost amid the upheaval. The human faces, blurred by the flickering flames, appeared a mix of determination and weariness, caught in a cycle of conflict that seemed both timeless and mundane. The irony of using fire to threaten fire itself lingered quietly, unspoken but heavy in the air. Eventually, the battle subsided, leaving behind only the soft crackling of remaining embers and the lingering scent of ash. The rivals, exhausted, and perhaps realizing the futility, withdrew into the shadows. The original camp's fire survived, flickering with a slightly diminished but resilient glow. Calm returned slowly as the humans sat in quiet reflection, their faces touched by the remaining embers' faint light. The day's chaos had only underscored how deeply intertwined life was with fire, its necessity, its danger, and its quiet persistence. Even in this moment of stillness, the fire's warmth seemed to carry the weight of human fragility and resilience together. Looking back, it's clear that fire's true power lies not just in its heat, but in its subtle role as a silent witness to human folly and perseverance. Its flicker is a reminder of how easily peace can flicker out, and how fragile even the most vital possessions are in the hands of human imperfection. The faces glimpsed through shadows seem to carry a quiet wisdom, perhaps the understanding that survival isn't just about controlling fire, but accepting its unpredictability. As they settle into the night, the small campfire's gentle glow persists, quietly linking past and present. In the stillness that follows, one can't help but ponder how much of human history is written in the quiet, steady hum of a well-tended fire, an ordinary miracle that keeps the mundane world turning. In the quiet hours of early dawn, the tribe's fires flickered softly against the encroaching darkness, providing a gentle warmth that seemed to hold back the chill of the night. The elders, with faces blurred in the dim light, gathered around the glowing embers, their eyes reflecting the quiet importance of this small, controlled blaze. It was a fragile thing, just sticks, stones, and patience. But without it, the cold and shadowed wilderness would seep into their bones, reminding them of their vulnerability. In those moments, the humble fire felt like more than just a tool. It was their fragile promise of safety and comfort in an unpredictable world. They did not yet understand how deeply fire would shape their culture, their tools, or their survival, only that it was nothing short of essential, a quiet anchor in their daily lives. As the morning sun stretched pale fingers across the land, the tribe faced the looming challenge of protection against rival groups, wild animals, and the uncertainties of hunger. In the midst of these tensions, they rekindled the fire, slowly coaxing warmth back into the circle of their small community. Sparks flew uncertainly at first, then settled into steady flames, a testament to their collective effort and patience. The irony hung quietly despite their resourcefulness. A single lapse could silence the fire forever, leaving them exposed and cold. Yet, in this fragile rebirth, they found a perverse comfort. The fire's flickering gave them a moment of calm amid their constant vigilance, a reminder that their safety still depended on something as simple and irreplaceable as flame. As evening descended, the tribe gathered once more around the seated fires, sharing stories in subdued voices, their faces softly illuminated. The steady, familiar glow calmed their nerves, and a sense of quiet pride settled among them, an unspoken acknowledgement of their shared reliance. Their earlier fears of losing the flame seemed distant now, replaced by a calm acceptance that this small, flickering fire was woven into every minute of their existence. The fleeting moments of humor, an awkward toss of a stick, or a wary glance at the dark woods brought levity to their routine, softening the seriousness of survival. It was this simple, shared dependence on fire, on each other, that subtly cemented the foundation of their community, even in the stillness of the night. In the gentle light of dawn, the tribe moved quietly, prepared to rekindle the fires and face another day in a world shaped by the subtle, unyielding force of flame. They carried with them an unspoken understanding that fire, in its humble existence, had become the core of their culture, the silent guardian of their safety, and an enduring symbol of human fragility intertwined with resilience. Reflecting on this, they saw more than just warmth or a tool. They recognized it as a fragile lifeline, a small but persistent echo of hope. Perhaps, in the slow attentiveness to that flickering glow, they preserved a quiet wisdom, knowing that survival depended less on strength and more on patience, on the careful tending of their fragile ember of tomorrow. On an ordinary morning, in a cold, windswept steppe, a small group of Homo erectus awoke to the gray light filtering through sparse grasses. They moved cautiously, stringing their simple tools together, unaware that their quiet routines were about to shift. At some point, as sparks from a nearby fire flickered and died, one of them, perhaps by chance, noticed the embers glowing softly in the dying ash. It was a bare, unremarkable moment, like many others before it, but within it lay a faint promise, a small flicker of curiosity amid the endless quiet. The air was thick with anticipation, yet also with the slow, steady boredom of routine discovery, an almost sleepy pause on humanity's slow journey toward mastery. And so, amid the flickering shadows, they learned to coax tiny sparks from the dying embers, unwittingly opening a door to a world of warmth and safety. As days passed, the small band began to understand, in a hesitant and awkward way, that fire was more than a fleeting glow. It crackled softly and radiated warmth, chasing away the biting cold and shadows that danced too close. Sometimes the hum of their simple voices and the gentle crackle became a kind of lullaby, a mundane miracle they depended on, yet barely recognized as such. Behind their blank, weathered faces, A quiet tension grew. Could they keep the flames alive? Or would it slip away like a whisper on the wind? Still, amid this subtle anxiety, they kept returning to the flames, drawn by their gentle allure, aware, in a vague, distant way, that this small mastery could carry them further across the endless plains. It was a modest, tentative step that made the vastness seem a little less relentless. Irony hung softly in the air as they learned to guard their fires, sometimes piling on small stones or blowing gently to keep the flames alive. Yet the effort felt almost underwhelming in the grand story of human progress. They became cautious custodians of these tiny blazes, knowing that a stray gust or careless movement could undo everything. Occasionally, their attempts to cook food or keep creatures at bay brought fleeting, mundane triumphs. They sat around their fires, chewing in silence, a little more secure, a little more human. Still, the humor was quiet. How something so simple could seem so profound one day, only to become part of the background the next. Their faces, tired and steady, reflected a subtle acceptance of this slow, unglamorous progress. Yet deep down, perhaps, they knew it was unlikely to make history. It was only fire, yet somehow it was everything. In the calm of those evenings, as the glow softened and shadows lengthened, the small group would lean back on their ankles and watch the flames flicker softly, little sparks. Much like moments in their lives, the fire had become a silent companion, a quiet force binding them in shared silence, but also in lonely, collective routine. They sat in that gentle glow, listening to the wind and to each other's quiet breathing, perhaps wondering if the next small discovery was just beyond their reach. The mundane was here, nothing grand or sacred, just human effort wrapped in smoky air and the faint warmth on their skin. There was a strange, unspoken peace in these evenings. The world was enough for now, with all its imperfections and slow, unhurried progress. And so they stayed there, in the slow, soft glow of their fire, watching the night grow ever deeper. Looking back from a distant future, it seems almost banal that fire, a flickering, fragile thing, could change everything. Yet, in that subdued twilight of early life, it offered a kind of quiet surrender to the slow, unending human yearning for safety and comfort. Their faces blurred and unremarkable, their hands calloused and steady. They had merely taken one small step, a spark out of countless chances, and made it their own. It was a humble victory amid endless, mundane days, a gift so simple, yet so slowly transforming their migration across silent plains. Sometimes, in quiet reflection, it's strange to consider how such an ordinary act, the coaxing of a flame, could set the stage for centuries of humans wandering, settling, and dreaming. Perhaps that's the subtle irony of history, that the quietest moments hold the greatest weight, still and unassuming, just like the flickering of a tiny fire on a cold step. In the hush of twilight, the earliest humans gathered around flickering flames, their faces flickering softly in the orange glow. The warmth was more than comfort. It was a quiet step toward transforming their lives, offering a fragile shield against the dark and its lurking, unseen threats. When fire crackled against the cool evening air, it felt like a small act of defiance, a momentary claim over the vast, open plains that stretched beyond their camp. They watched shadows dance and listened to the distant calls of nocturnal predators, realizing the fire's gentle illumination could stand as a silent guardian. And so, with a simple spark, the night began to seem less terrifying, more like a space to linger in, small, ordinary, yet quietly profound. As nights became safer under the watchful glow of fire, the tribe found themselves venturing further into open lands, feeling less constrained by the edge of the dark. With the threat of predators somewhat mitigated, they started camping in places that had seemed too exposed before: plains, clearings, places where the stars shone freely and the wind whispered across the grass. Yet this expansion brought its own tensions. The unfamiliarity of the wide open space sometimes unsettled them, and the flickering fire cast uncertain shadows that flickered like memories of danger. It was a subtle, ongoing dance, finding comfort in the light while wary of the night's silent stillness. Days blended into nights as they adapted painfully, but patiently, grasping at stability amid volatile horizons. Irony lingered in the aftermath of that simple discovery. The very light that kept predators at bay also drew curious neighbors. As the tribe's fire became a beacon, neighboring groups caught the glow and approached, claws and spear points lowered with cautious curiosity. These encounters could be awkward, a slow, silent exchange of exchanged glances and tentative gestures, almost as if the fire itself invited small, mundane negotiations over shelter or food. Prophets and elders, faces blurred and unseen, might have wondered whether their own need for safety was now leading them into unintended, perhaps mildly ridiculous meetings. The flames flickered like unintentional invitations and subtly replaced the loneliness of survival with an early, awkward sense of community. All in all, the world grew a little smaller, a little more connected over simple sparks and shared silences. With time, the fire's glow became a steady, familiar presence inside their simple, nightly routines. The tribe would gather, sharing stories, flickering shadows dancing on their tired faces, voices low and even. The open plains, once intimidating, now felt calm, their fears eased by the unhurried rhythm of fireside life, meat roasting, bones cracking, children yawning into the still air. The need for constant vigilance softened into a quiet acknowledgement of the quiet resilience humans can muster in mundane moments. The glow of fire, though trivial in the grand scope of history, had become a silent companion, a small testament to their slow, inevitable progress. Even as the night pressed on, life hummed softly, mundane and meaningful in its gentle persistence. Looking back, it is easy to see how that faint, flickering light shifted the course of human memory, an unassuming marker of their shared ingenuity and quiet patience. The fire's glow traveled beyond mere survival, becoming a symbol of human perseverance amid the slow, imperfect march into unknown worlds. As they sat around fires that became both protectors and gathering points, they unknowingly set the foundation for future stories of connection and discovery. Simple acts woven into the fabric of human life. The dark, after all, remained a quiet observer, unchanged. But humans learned to share their small, warm spaces, and in doing so, made the night a little less lonely. Perhaps, in the end, the greatest irony lay in how something so ordinary, the humble flame, united wandering tribes in their slow, patient journey into the future. Long ago, early humans sat huddled around flickering fires, their faces barely illuminated by the soft glow, as they silently appreciated the warmth that kept the cold at bay. With each crackle and smoke curl, they found a faint comfort in the simple act of fire, a small but steady force that gave them hope for survival in a vast, harsh landscape. It was a quiet beginning, one filled with cautious victories and tentative fires, as they slowly learned to control this flickering miracle. The world beyond their caves remained distant and indifferent, yet with fire, the boundaries of their understanding subtly expanded. Day after day, they grew more attuned to the subtle hum of flames, sensing that this quiet energy might carry them further than they had imagined. As they ventured into colder, more forbidding territories, the need for fire became more urgent, its glow a signal of resilience amid the silent, snow-laden plains. With heated stones and careful handling, they melted patches of ice and cooked the tough meat they carried, each small act a testament to patience and necessity. The landscape stretched cold and empty before them, mountains and tundras that once seemed insurmountable now brushed by the faint glow of their fires. They moved slowly, uncertain but determined, their footprints muffled by snow, their eyes searching for what the world might still offer if only they could overcome its barriers. The irony was gentle. What once limited them, the ice and mountains, now seemed slightly less formidable, with just a crackling fire and steady hands. Between the flickers of the firelight, they exchanged weary looks that said little, yet carried quiet humor. How often they fumbled with stones, or burned their fingers in the act of progress. The distant horizon, usually an impenetrable border, now felt like a sluggish challenge to be met with slow, deliberate effort. The simple warmth of the fire contrasted oddly with the sharp chill in their bones. It was both comfort and a reminder of how little they knew yet. In this muted effort, they found a strange similarity to the prophets, whose faces remained unseen, obscured by shadows, or distant dawns, figures of hope, perhaps, or just more human gaps in their understanding. The world persisted in silence, and they persisted in feeling their way forward, stumbling through the icy dark with muffled determination. Eventually, the cold and the mountains became less formidable in the gentle light of persistent fires that offered small victories, a patch of thawed ground, a tender piece of meat. Their footsteps grew more confident, the landscape more familiar, though the vastness still imbued a sense of quiet humility. They learned to listen, to sense the subtle shifts in temperature and sound, finding stillness in the simple act of waiting and watching. The distant figures of sacred visionaries remained blurred, intangible, perhaps just shadows cast by their own flickering fires, proof that even in pursuit of greatness, human effort was often just a quiet stance against the infinite. They settled into the rhythm of their humble migration, carrying with them a soft humor for their occasional blunders, feeling small yet surprisingly capable within the vast, unspoken wilderness. Looking back, the journey across the frozen frontier reveals how fire, a mere tool, subtly transformed the course of human migration, turning obstacles into manageable phases of their slow passage into the unknown. The cold that once kept them bound now became an environment they could gently adapt to, their fires quietly asserting presence amid endless snow and stone. In that stillness, they carried the quiet irony that the greatest change was often made of tiny, almost mundane acts, striking stones, tending fires, sharing silent meals. Their faces, forever veiled in the faintest glow or shadow, bore the quiet dignity of beings slowly learning their place in an indifferent world. And so, in the gentle unfolding of their slow steps, they left behind not grand victories, but the quiet, almost humorous awareness that progress was simply a matter of patience and firelight. In the dim glow of early fires, humans first grasped the fragile warmth that flickered in their hands. These sparks, barely more than a chance encounter with dry wood, marked the slow beginning of something larger, a tiny, steady revolution in daily life. With each successful flame, a quiet confidence grew, as if the world's chill had momentarily bowed in respect. It was an unremarkable change in many ways, yet it offered the promise of safety and a faint, distant light in the long, dark nights. The days when fire was merely a necessity slowly turned into a subtle, almost unnoticed milestone in human history, one that quietly promised new horizons. As fire came to be more reliably controlled, small groups began to carry portable hearths, cradling their embers like fragile treasures across varied terrains. The familiar crackle followed them along well-worn paths, echoing softly through forests and plains, whispering of journeys yet to come. They discovered that fire-hardening tools and preserving embers in clay allowed them to extend their reach. Each flicker, a tiny beacon, guiding them further from their origins. Yet there was a gentle irony in this. It was the most mundane thing, fire's comforting glow, that became their compass, not some grand navigation. The quiet hum of embers and the patter of footsteps kept rhythm with the slow march toward new lands. With each new way station lit by a fire, the network of travel grew more intricate, almost like a delicate thread woven through the landscape. The travelers carried their small, portable hearths like curious relics, constantly ready to ignite a familiar glow in unfamiliar territories. Sometimes the light cast strange, elongated shadows on rocky walls, unnoticed by those whose minds were preoccupied with reaching the next destination. There was irony in their optimism, believing that fire's steady light could guide them through the vast, indifferent wilderness. Still, beneath the fatigue, there lingered the soft humor that humans found comfort in routine, even in the face of boundless uncertainty. They moved onward, continually stitched into a tapestry of wandering kin. Eventually, the network of light stations coalesced into a more ambitious migration, one toward the fertile river valleys that promised abundance and stability. These journeys, slow and deliberate, were emblematic of human perseverance in the slow dance with nature's indifference. The fires, once simple sparks in the dark, now flickered across vast distances like silent, flickering signals calling home. There was a calm in this steady progression, a kind of quiet acceptance that perhaps the world wouldn't change faster than they could carry fire. It was a stillness born of patience and slight humor at how humans persisted in their small, imperfect acts of navigation. And somewhere beneath that calm, a quiet hope persisted for a better future, carved by fire's gentle glow. Looking back, it's easy to see how something so ordinary as mastering fire quietly shaped entire human landscapes, turning scattered camps into structured societies, along the river banks. They moved not with grandiose dreams, but with simple, persistent acts, stoking embers, building hearths, lighting way stations. The image of their faces, blurred behind smoke and shadow, becomes an expression of humble endurance. Fire had become more than a tool. It was their silent companion in an ongoing dialogue with the earth. And in that slow, unassuming journey, we find a reflection of human resilience, an almost humorous dedication to small acts that, in their quiet way, changed everything. Long before the hum of modern life, early humans sat around flickering fires, their eyes catching the warm glow against the dark night. There was a gentle, almost resigned quiet at these moments, a shared comfort that seemed both simple and profound. It was here, amidst the crackling logs and the soft rustling of leaves, that the quiet wonder of fire first took root in their minds, stirring a faint sense of possibility. They watched the flames dance and flicker, unaware that this slow ignition would silently shift their entire story, marking the start of something that might almost be called destiny. The first sparks, after all, were small, easily missed, yet somehow carried the weight of what was to come. As humans learned to control the flames, there was a subtle shift, a kind of cautious optimism that grew among small groups settling into new territories. They built more stable fires, annoyingly persistent in their pursuit of warmth and protection, and in doing so, began to stay longer in one place. The steady glow of firesides became a quiet anchor, holding the nights at bay and giving rise to the faint hum of daily life. Yet this new stability brought a quiet tension, an awareness that their mastery was fragile, easily lost in wind or careless movements. Ironically, their joy in the fire's warmth was tinged with an underlying worry, as if the very thing that made them safer also made them more aware of their vulnerability to the unpredictable elements. With time, what once seemed mundane, striking sparks, fanning embers, rubbing sticks, became almost ritualistic, accompanied by a strange sense of ironic pride. Early humans discovered that fire could be shaped and managed, leading to rudimentary metallurgy and the faint clang of tools cooling in the dirt. These little achievements, a piece of copper or a sharpened spear, carried a weight far beyond their simplicity, yet often seemed like small, oddly mundane milestones in a broader, almost sleepy progression. Prophets' faces remained obscured, hidden behind shadows or soft light, as if their insights were too subtle to be captured by appearance, floating instead in whispers and shared glances. Irony danced softly in these moments. They were making fire, yes, but also creating the slow, quiet hum of progress that would carry them onward. By now, the fireside had become part of the landscape of daily life, an ordinary feature, like weather or the changing seasons. Villages became permanent, their mud and stone dwellings quietly clustered around the ever-burning hearths. The faint, rhythmic clatter of metallurgy and the gentle murmur of conversation blended into the background, a calm, unhurried rhythm that spoke of human patience. The passing down of fire-making skills and stories stitched generations together, woven into the fabric of their existence without fanfare. Prophets' faces, if glimpsed, were merely flickers of blurred features, their insights woven into the very fabric of the communal calm. For all their small struggles, things had settled into a tranquil, steady hum, as if the world itself had finally caught its breath. Now, looking back, it's evident that the mastery of fire quietly carved out the course of human history with a gentle hand. The fires that warmed their nights and forged their tools became silent symbols of agency, a legacy passed softly from one hand to the next. It was not grandeur or divine intervention that propelled them outward, but the slow, unassuming warmth of embers held close. Humanity's migration, therefore, was stitched into the rhythmic flickers of these flames, an understated movement grounded in simple acts and quiet persistence. Perhaps it is humbling to realize that what seemed so mundane at the time, stoking and sharing a fire, eventually made everything possible. And yet, all the while, the fires burned on with silent, unceasing patience. In the quiet dawn of their discovery, the tribe gathered around a small fire, the flickering light casting gentle shadows on their faces. They had learned, through patient curiosity, that fire's warmth could turn tough, raw meat into something softer, more inviting, almost like a new language of nourishment. At first, the act was simple. A few moments of holding strips of meat near the flaming glow, and then biting into tender, aromatic bites that seemed to satisfy more deeply than before. The fire seemed to awaken not just their food, but also a subtle sense of community. Small stories passed in hushed tones as smoke curled into the fading sky. Yet, beneath that warmth, a quiet tension grew. Other groups saw their new gift and wondered if it was meant to stay contained within that small circle. The story of cooking had begun, with all its quiet promise and the faintest hint of rivalry in the cool air. As days turned into weeks, the tribe's reliance on fire became both a comfort and a gamble. They started to cook more often, experimenting with different techniques, some roasted, some smoked, each meal carrying the weight of careful attention and haphazard skill. The aroma wafted through the encampment, drawing curious glances from neighboring groups who watched in silent envy or suspicion. Tensions grew quietly, like the smoke, visible but indifferent to the humans below. Occasionally, rival parties edged closer, their silent stares heavy with intent, risking the fragile peace that the fire's glow had kindled. The tribe's new tool was no longer just warmth. It was a border, a subtle marker of progress, wrapped in a strange irony that something so simple could stir such complex feelings of possession and threat. Ironically, amidst the unseen threats and whispered warnings, the fire's presence became almost mundane in the day-to-day life, routine and predictable like the ebb of the tide. The hum of conversation around the flickering flames softened into a sleepy murmur, punctuated only by the crackling logs and the distant rustling of animals. The story of their discovery seeped into quiet rituals, their own small ceremonies, where faces blurred in shadow, unimportant in the greater flow of time. They began to realize that cooking had changed more than just their diet. It subtly reweaved their social fabric, weaving new routines while thinning the edges of old tensions. The fire, once a conquest, now simply burned, an unremarkable yet essential part of their ongoing story. In the calm that settled like dust after a long day, the tribe sat peacefully in the glow of the fire, each person lost in small internal musings on the taste of their meat, the warmth of the flames, the quiet rhythm of their shared existence. The uncertainty had ebbed, replaced by a gentle acceptance of their modest achievement. They understood that their newfound capacity for cooking, however simple it seemed, also carried the weight of human imperfection, occasional burnt edges, uneven heat, or simple failures that reminded them they were still learning. Faces, now less blurred and more familiar in the low light, wore expressions of weariness mixed with a quiet humor, an acknowledgement that progress was always a slow, imperfect dance. In these moments, their history felt like a gentle, endless pause, a story still unfolding and forever quietly humbling. Eventually, they reflected on the small, ordinary change that had forever shifted their relationship with food and each other. The fire had become more than just a tool. It was a silent witness to their daily lives, an agent of simple transformation and shared memory. They saw their story as a thread in a vast, slow weave, stitched together by patience, curiosity, and a touch of irony. How something so basic, a flame on a forgotten plain, could carry them into a future they could only glimpse in the warm glow. Perhaps, in the end, their quiet tale was about human imperfection and the enduring need to be a little bit warm, a little bit fed, and endlessly curious about what small change tomorrow might bring. Their history, like the fire's glow, flickered steadily onward, softly illuminating the slow journey forward. In the quiet dawn of human cooperation, early tribes discovered the soft glow of fire as a steady friend. Its warm light illuminated the rough shape of their roasted roots and charred meats, transforming the dullness of raw sustenance into something more nourishing and comforting. The flickering flames seemed to whisper promises of increased strength and stamina, encouraging the community to stay longer in one place, to share stories and small laughs as they ate in the gentle evening glow. Life was slow, measured by the crackling of wood and the stretch of shadows, and the smell of smoke became a familiar scent in their days. It was quietly clear that fire, this ancient, unassuming force, had begun to redefine their very way of living without fanfare, merely through countless small, smoky meals. As days and seasons passed, neighboring tribes watched with that slow, distant curiosity that humans seem to reserve for things they do not quite understand, but find valuable enough to consider. Driven by a mixture of hunger and desire, some bands drifted closer, their eyes flickering like the flames they admired, hoping to grasp the secret of the fire's persistent glow. Small skirmishes broke out over access to the shared warmth, furtive, soft exchanges that felt more like awkward trades than outright fights. Yet they hinted at the fragile border between cooperation and conflict. The tribe's elders, faces shadowed behind walls of time and age, often looked on with distant amusement, aware that beneath the smoke and sparks, human nature was quietly testing its limits once again. Fire's promise of nourishment was now tangled with a new, subtle tension, an irony that warmth could become a catalyst for unrest. Ironically, the more they protected their fire, the more it seemed to invite quiet rivalry, neighbors' eyes lingering on the glow after dark. Small bands trying to mimic the flickering shapes they watched from afar. Sometimes, a stray ember would drift into unfamiliar hands. Other times, a tribe member might secretly go a little farther than allowed, reaching toward the warmth as if to steal a piece of its quiet magic. Despite the tensions, these encounters often dissolved into awkward exchanges, meals shared in uneasy silence, the kind that leaves more questions than answers. Their faces, blurred and unreadable, reflected the slow, unspoken realization that fire's protective power was both a blessing and a fragile barrier. The flames, once a simple source of aid, gradually tangled themselves in the quiet, mundane dance of human desire and territoriality. In the stillness that followed many of these small conflicts, the daily rhythm settled into a calmer pattern. Fires burned steadily through the cool nights, their gentle warmth wrapping the tribe in a quiet reassurance. The community learned to share their hearths, their glances now laced with a kind of knowing patience, an acceptance that fire was a gift, both fragile and vital. The faces, partly lit and partly veiled in shadow, seemed to carry a calm that belied their earlier conflicts, as if in their quiet routine they found a modest, unnoticed peace. It was as if the constant presence of fire had, over time, become less of a source of tension and more of an unspoken, shared trust, an anchor amidst the wandering human condition. They sat in silence, listening to the soft crackle of wood, their bodies and minds slowly adjusting to the gentle flicker of time itself. Looking back, it was perhaps inevitable that fire, the mundane, persistent symbol of human resilience, would carry within it both nourishment and quiet discord. Their faces, often unfocused and indistinct, seemed to carry the weight of countless small lessons learned in the glow of the flames, that safety can breed envy, that warmth can inspire longing, and that even the simplest of tools can forge human stories, both peaceful and restless. The hearths, now slightly more than mere cooking spots, reflected the slow, imperfect progress of their shared human journey. As the silent centuries stretched onward, the fire remained an enduring symbol, a humble reminder that progress often comes wrapped in the gentle irony of human kindness and quiet conflicts, simple and profound in their ordinary persistence. In the quiet hush of early evening, the tribe gathered around their small, flickering fire, which had become more than just a source of warmth. It was their silent guardian in the darkness. The smoke curled lazily upward, carrying the faint aroma of roasted roots and smoked game, a simple testament to their growing reliance on fire to unlock new flavors and nutrients. As they settled into their usual routines, sharing stories, flicking ash into the fire's glow, they regarded the hearth with a kind of gentle reverence, unaware of how fragile this fragile blaze truly was. They knew almost instinctively that fire was their link to survival, an invisible shield against the chill and the unseen predators lurking beyond sight. Life was measured in small moments around this shared warmth, a slow, steady rhythm that felt, for now, peaceful. Then, suddenly, a gust of wind announced itself with a sharp crack, and the fire's flames flickered uncertainly, threatening to surrender to the advancing winter storm. Heavy clouds gathered above like a silent, gray judge, foreshadowing a night where even the strongest hearth could falter. The tribe watched in subdued apprehension as sparks sputtered and danced, fighting to hold their ground against the icy assault. Perhaps, for a moment, they wondered if their fire's light might be extinguished forever, an irony not lost on seasoned ears, knowing how often hardship came from such quiet vulnerabilities. Their hands hesitated, instinctively grasping simple tools, anchoring themselves to the hope that their efforts to tame fire would withstand this harsh natural challenge. It was a test of both their craft and patience, unfolding in slow, weary defiance. In the dim evening light, the tribe's members experimented with small adjustments, leaning closer with bare hands, shielding the flame with rough stones, each motion deliberate and unhurried. Yet, amid their coordinated effort, a mocking thought occurred. No sacred ritual, no sacred figure's unseen face could truly guarantee the fire's endurance. Only their patient, imperfect work. Outside, the wind howled softly, almost like an old storyteller whispering ironic tales of fire's fickle nature, of humans forever perched on the edge of darkness and cold. The irony, of course, was that their survival depended on such fragile sources of warmth and nourishment, almost like a quiet joke played by the elements, delicate as a thin sheet of ice. Still, they persisted, knowing that the next moment's calm could depend on their small, humble gestures. Finally, after hours of cautious tending, a faint ember glowed steadily, a slow, patient breath of life that grew into a gentle blaze, enough to stave off the icy grip of winter's night. The tribe exhaled together, their collective effort quietly reaffirming an age-old truth. Even in the face of adversity, persistence can coax warmth from the cold, mundane elements. Layers of smoked meat and roasted roots now seemed more comforting than before, their flavors slightly richer, touched by the smoke and the shared struggle. As the storm outside exhausted itself, so too did the quiet tension within, settling into a calm, reflective routine. The fire, once again secure, became a symbol not of invincibility, but of patience and human stubbornness, an understated victory in the routine saga of survival. Later, as the night deepened and the wind's song softened, the tribe members sat in contemplation around the now stable hearth, their faces softly illuminated by the warm glow. It was in this calm that they noticed, perhaps, the quiet humor of their existence, how their survival depended on such simple, imperfect acts. Tending, protecting, waiting. The flames flickered softly, casting shadows that danced like ancient, forgotten stories on the walls of their memories. Their faces, blurred by the shadows, but somehow expressive in their weariness, reflected a shared understanding that survival was less about grandeur and more about enduring the smallest, slowest moments with quiet humility. As they rested, they knew well enough that their fragile fire was a modest, enduring miracle, an irony of warmth born from the mundane persistence of human hands. Long ago, in the faint glow of dawn, humans gathered around flickering fires that hinted at something beyond mere warmth, perhaps a whisper of understanding. The crackling flames offered small comforts, their soft light touching worn faces and calloused hands, promising a fragile connection to a world they could barely name. In those quiet moments, it seemed as if fire had arrived by some unseen wish, settling into their daily routines with an unassuming presence. Life was still mostly about survival, but the fire's gentle glow made everything feel just a little less uncertain. It was ordinary, yes, but quietly momentous, a simple shift in the rhythm of existence that would echo through generations. As the fire became a fixture, conflicts arose over its control: who would tend it, who could approach it, and how it might be shared or hoarded. Sometimes, fights would flare as fiercely as the flames themselves, and then die down with the same tired patience. It was ironic. After all, fire was a gift, but a gift that demanded careful guardianship and respect, lest it consume everything. The murmurs around the hearth shifted from cautious whispers to tentative stories, passing down the knowledge that their ancestors had harnessed a force both wild and wondrous. This tension threaded through their lives, a quiet reminder that progress was often just a small, measured risk. Nonetheless, fire's power grew, quietly cementing its place at the core of their communal story. Humans learned to roast roots and fish, transforming their simple meals into warm, fragrant offerings that seemed almost luxurious in comparison. The irony was in how something so basic, heat, could redefine what they ate, making their diets more nourishing, yet strangely uniform. They chuckled at the notion that fire, which once seemed like a dangerous stranger, was now their trusted companion in cooking and comfort. The crackle and smell became a familiar, unremarkable symphony, an every night backdrop to their modest, shared lives. Still, beneath the surface, they recognized how much had changed. Their health slightly improved, their children's bones a little stronger. Yet, it was all tinged with the quiet humility of a slow, ongoing revolution. Over time, the hearth's glow shifted from a transient flicker to a steady, welcoming light, an enduring symbol of their collective achievement. As generations passed, they traded stories not only of survival, but of gratitude for this steady presence, even as their faces remained shadowed and blurred in the dim. They sat in silence, watching the fire dance, feeling the warmth radiate outward, settling into the bones of their daily routines. In this calm, there was an unmistakable sense of continuity. The fire connected past, present, and future in a silent, unbroken chain. It held a quiet dignity, reminding them that progress was slow, often subtle, and best appreciated when little changed at all. The fire was no longer just a tool. It was a legacy, patiently passed along like a softly glowing ember. As the daylight faded into dusk, They looked upon their hearth with a gentle, knowing smile, perhaps not fully aware of how profoundly it had altered them. The fire's quiet presence had shaped their diets, their health, and their culture, embedding itself into the fabric of their stories and their identities. They passed the flame, not as a grand gift or a divine favor, but as a modest act of continuity, an acknowledgement that progress often arrived unnoticed, flickering softly in the background of everyday life. With each carefully rekindled fire, they reaffirmed their connection to a slow, shared human journey, one of constant, unspoken patience. And so, in a world of small triumphs and understated triumphs, the hearth endured, whispering softly of history's quiet, enduring humor. That change, after all, is often just a matter of kindling. Aki sat quietly by the small, smoky fire, her fingers trembling slightly as she struggled to coax the flickering ember into a steady blaze. The night sounds crickets, distant rustling, seemed to watch silently as she worked, the warmth just beginning to fill the cool air. In those early moments, fire was merely a small miracle, a fragile gift passed from hand to hand, fragile yet vital. The tribe's stories were simple but earnest, each telling punctuated by the crackling flames that seemed to breathe life into their collective patience. It was a quiet beginning, an unspoken hope that this glowing point could become more than just light. It could become something that binds them all together. As days rolled into nights, the tribe learned to share this fragile light more deliberately, passing the ember from one to another with small gestures, an extended hand, a cautious smile. With fire, they discovered the first rituals, sharing food around the blaze, telling stories softly so the flames seemed to listen, and taking turns guarding the warmth against the cold. Yet, amidst this newfound connection, there was an irony. The fire, which promised unity, also became a source of quiet competition. Who kept it alive longer, whose story was favored. The flickering flames flickered not just with warmth, but with the subtle complexities of human pride in their tiny communal achievement. Sometimes the flames sputtered or dimmed unexpectedly, reminding them of their fragile mastery over fire, an imperfect dance of patience and effort. Still, they persisted, amused by their collective clumsiness, blowing on embers too hard, sharing stories that sometimes drifted into silence or laughter. The day-to-day act of passing the flame became a ritual of trust, a mundane yet sacred act that subtly cemented their shared identity. Those moments of quiet cooperation, one ember carefully transferred, a meal shared under glowing light, were humble but profound in their simplicity. It was as if the fire had become a mirror for their own small, human imperfections, quietly woven into their growing community. Eventually, the tribe's quiet routine settled into a soothing rhythm. The fires glow a constant in their nights, an unending, imperfect chain of passing and sharing. The stories they told grew richer, their shadows stretching long on the ground. Yet beneath the surface, everyone understood the fragile, fleeting nature of their communal glow. Sometimes, someone would sit in contemplative silence, the smoke curling upward, pondering the small, day-to-day acts of kindness that held everything together. Through it all, the fire remained a gentle reminder that connection was built not just on grand gestures, but on ordinary acts of patience, passing the flame, sharing a meal, listening quietly. There was comfort in knowing that, despite their flaws, they had created something enduring in their slow dance of continuity. In those long, calm nights, it was easy to see that the fire was more than just heat or light. It was a quiet testament to their resilience, an ancient, imperfect symbol of human togetherness that endured because they kept tending to it, one small act at a time. Looking back, the act of sharing the flame reveals how communities are forged in subtle ways, weaving individual fragility into a collective fabric, often without grand intention or understanding. The blurred faces of their ancestors lingered in the shadows of their memories, unseen but present in every passing ember. As they rested under the soft glow, it was clear that this slow, deliberate act of passing fire was ultimately a quiet, human effort, an enduring testament to their simple, imperfect attempt at lasting connection. As twilight settled over the modest encampment, the tribe gathered around the flickering fire, its warm glow casting gentle shadows on weathered faces. The fire had become more than just a source of heat. It was a quiet anchor in their daily rhythm, a place of shared stories and simple comfort. The crackling wood sounded almost like a lullaby, steady and familiar, as everyone settled into their evening routines. Despite the chill in the air, there was an unspoken sense of calm, a fragile unity bound by the silent hum of the flames. It was an ordinary evening, yet everything seemed held together by fire, by trust, by a mutual dependence that made them, for now, a small, peaceful world. Suddenly, dark clouds gathered overhead, and a distant rumble of thunder threatened their tranquil evening. The wind picked up, snuffing at the flames and whispering warning across the gathered figures. Panic was unnecessary, but subtly felt, an instinct that the fire could soon be stolen by the storm or rival groups lurking beyond sight. The tribe's men and women pressed closer, their eyes flickering with a cautious determination as they watched the dark sky swallow the stars. Here, in this quiet moment, the fire had shifted from a symbol of unity into a fragile barrier they had to defend. and the looming threat whispered a difficult truth. Nothing is permanent, not even warmth. Irony drifted through the night like a slow-moving cloud. Thieves and neighboring tribes, covetous of their warmth, now waiting in shadows, proven to be less readily visible than their own fears. In one corner of the camp, a young man chuckled softly as a rival's attempt to steal a piece of burning wood was foiled by missteps and thin, trembling hands. The fire's resilience seemed almost amused, flickering in quiet defiance, while enemies hovered just beyond the reach of the flames. The tribe's elders, faces blurred by the flickering light, negotiated with calm but wary voices, perhaps uncertain whether their alliance or their fire would survive the night's trial. In this strange comedy of human effort and elemental caprice, survival hinged on patience and the slow dance of negotiation. As the storm passed, dawn crept softly over the horizon, washing the embers with a gentle light that revealed the scarred but still standing hearth. The tension of the night seemed distant now, smoothed out by the slow, inevitable return to normalcy. The tribe members, now more reflective than fearful, tended to their fire and mended broken tools with quiet efficiency. The flickering flames sent sparks into a cool morning air, and a shared sense of endurance settled like a calm interlude in their ongoing story. It was clear that what had threatened them had also, in some intangible way, reaffirmed their reliance not just on fire, but on each other's steadiness, reminding them of the quiet strength in simple perseverance. In the end, the community sat quietly around the dying embers, watching the last tendrils of smoke drift upward. Their faces, now softly illuminated, held expressions of mild amusement and gentle resignation. Everything was as it always was, in slow, human fashion. The fire, with its gentle crackle, seemed to hum a familiar tune of resilience and shared history. Perhaps, in these small moments of hardship and harmony, they understood that their true survival was less about the flame itself and more about the muted, almost invisible bonds forged in the quiet hours of waiting and watching. With the day beginning anew, they returned to their routines, carrying the subtle irony of life, never quite guaranteed, but always enough to keep going. In the faint glow of early evenings, the tribe gathered around their modest fire pit, the flames flickering softly against the texture of rough stones. It was a humble moment, people sitting close, sharing quiet words, or simply watching the gentle dance of light and shadow. The warmth seeped into their skins, a small comfort after a day of labor and wandering. Fire was a common sight, yet its presence held a gentle magic, something ordinary that felt extraordinary in its warmth. In these moments, The community felt bound, an unspoken understanding woven into the quiet rhythm of daily life, tentative but stable. One fateful day, a sudden gust of wind carried sparks into the dry brush of the valley, igniting an enormous blaze that threatened to swallow the land and sever the fragile threads of their community. Panic stirred quietly among the people, some shouting, others frozen. The sky darkened with smoke, and the scent of burning earth spread. The tribe's unity was tested as their usual routines dissolved into chaos. They looked at each other with wary eyes, unsure if the fragile bonds forged around their fire would hold or unravel in the face of disaster. The fire was no longer just a problem. It seemed to embody the chaos of change itself. Ironically, it was during this perilous time that the tribe's cleverness began to emerge. Azaki, a quiet thinker with weathered hands, stepped forward. With a calm that seemed almost bemused by the roaring flames, he urged them to think about how the fire might be more than destruction. Slowly, they learned to channel the blaze, redirecting its energy along natural contours, creating fire breaks with dirt and stones. The irony was not lost on anyone. What once threatened to destroy the community became the very tool that saved it. Their collective effort transformed panic into purpose. As the smoke thickened, but the fire's destructive hunger was finally tamed. As the flames subsided, a calm settled over the valley. The people lingered in silent recovery, their muscles tired, but their spirits subtly uplifted. They sat amidst the remnants of ash, the ember glow still faintly smoldering in their memories. The fire had become more than a catastrophe. It had woven itself into the fabric of their daily lives, a quiet reminder of their resilience and collective strength. In the gentle silence, they found a different kind of warmth, one that came from shared effort, patience, and understanding. The night stretched out peaceful and steady, like a long, slow breath after the storm's chaos. Reflecting on that day, the tribe realized that fire, with all its silent power, was perhaps their greatest teacher, an imperfect yet vital tool that both threatened and unified them. The flames had forged a new sense of purpose, one that depended not on divine intervention, but on human ingenuity and mutual trust. Over time, the memory of the great conflagration grew softer, a story told quietly around many fires that followed, less as a warning, more as a reminder of their shared capacity to endure. In the stillness of countless nights, they understood at last that the true glue of community was not just fire, but the slow, imperfect act of coming together despite the chaos, waiting for dawn with quiet hope. Long ago, in the quiet hours around the flickering fires, early humans huddled in small groups, their faces blurred in the glow. It was a simple act, striking a stone or gathering dried twigs, that summoned the first modest sparks, a faint glow that suddenly seemed heavier with promise than it deserved. These fires offered warmth and a fragile sense of safety, yet there was a subtle, persistent wonder in their eyes as they watched the flame dance and stubbornly hold on through the night. Peace settled softly as stories grew around these tiny embers, stories that would eventually stretch across generations, telling of a small spark that changed everything, quietly beginning civilization's slow ascent. As the years passed, the Lumen people learned to share their firecraft with neighboring groups, passing flickering embers and smoky tailies across silent forests and open plains. These exchanges were unhurried, almost deliberate, emphasizing the importance of trust and patience. Yet, this sharing also sparked a subtle tension: who owned the fire and who could keep it alive. Sometimes the flames went out unexpectedly, leaving everyone with the faint memory of warmth, and the irony that even the simplest tools could become sources of contention. Still, beneath these minor disputes, a quiet network of knowledge grew, fingers instructed in the delicate art of fire making, accumulating like ash over slow, gentle generations. Ironically, in their quest to control fire, humans began to see it as something sacred, almost beyond question, despite its humble origins. Prophets and wise ones, often veiled in shadows or obscured by flickering light, weaved their stories about the fire's divine nature. Yet all along, the truth was far simpler and perhaps more mundane. The fire was just a tool, a messy, imperfect thing, requiring constant tending and patience. It was neither blessing nor curse, but human hands that carried its weight, making leather stiff, metal softer, and night quieter. The irony was, despite all the rituals and tailies, the fire's true power lay in its practicality, quietly shaping the daily lives of those who dared to craft and keep it alive. Now, in the calm after centuries of flickering flames and shared embers, the memory of that first spark remains, just faint enough to feel like a distant whisper. It is a story carried in stories, a faint moral about how the smallest act, striking a stone once, can set a chain of change in motion. The fire, after all, did not just forge tools or extend days. It quietly forged human patience, dependency, and community. Watching the gentle glow in the now peaceful night, one might think that the greatest legacy of that humble flame was simply reminding everyone that progress is often slow, imperfect, and born from tiny sparks that refuse to die quietly, even when forgotten. In the soft dawn of their days, the tribe gathered around flickering embers, eyes tracing the gentle glow that seemed to breathe softly in the morning air. Aruk, with deliberate hands and a calm face blurred by shadow, demonstrated how to coax sparks from the smoldering heart of the fire, a gentle process of patience and respect for the silent power beneath. It was an ordinary act, yet it carried the weight of discovery, an ancient dance with heat and light, as much a ritual as a necessity. The tribe watched with quiet curiosity, their movements slow, each small gesture grounded in the simple magic of warmth and safety. This was the beginning of something neither grand nor hurried, merely a slow, steady step towards mastery over a flame that would define their days to come. As days passed, the fire became more than just a flickering source. It grew into a fragile, precious treasure that needed guarding. A rival clan, silent and elusive like shadows, began to threaten the calm order, seeking to steal the secret of embers, or simply disrupt the quiet rhythm. Vigilance became a subtle dance of watchful eyes and cautious movements, while the lumen crafted stone pits and leather-wrapped bundles, clumsy, imperfect attempts to keep the fire alive amid rain and rain. There was a subtle irony in their efforts. For all their precautions, the fire's true resilience was born from patience and adaptation rather than perfection. Every night, they sat watchful, aware that the flame's flicker was a quiet gift, easily snuffed out by careless hands or cunning rivals. Irony slowly seeped into the story as the tribe's careful guarding drew covert admiration from outsiders. Yet, at the same time, this vigilance became a quiet burden, an endless cycle of tending and thwarting, with no grand applause. The fire persisted, its glow flickering steadily, almost resigned in its familiarity. Aruk, whose face was often hidden in a shadow or soft light, watched as their small, imperfect efforts slowly became a form of quiet resilience. Sometimes the fire would crackle, as if amused at the stubborn human reliance on simple tools, or perhaps at the absurdity of guarding something so essential yet fragile. Life around the fire settled into a rhythm of slow turning, careful moments woven quietly into the fabric of unremarkable days that, collectively, carried the weight of years. In the calm after the storm of rivalry and danger, the tribe found a gentle peace, the fire burning subtly through the long, quiet night. The leather bundles and stone pits held their warmth, a soft glow that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the universe, slow, predictable, and oddly comforting. Aruk's face, now easily imagined as soft and open in the twilight, reflected a kind of silent satisfaction, an understanding that mastery was less about control and more about coexistence. The distant threats had faded into the background hum of life, replaced with the tender hum of quiet routines, the shared stories told in the flickering shadows. In those moments, the idea that a simple fire could be both a protector and a quiet companion felt somehow deeply human, an ordinary miracle woven into their lives. Looking back, the story of the fire's taming was less about the fire itself and more about human patience, humility, and the slow acceptance of imperfect mastery. The tribe's careful guardianship, small clever tricks, and moments of stillness created a quiet legacy, one that whispered softly through generations as they continued to rely on that flicker of light in the dark. Aruk's quiet teachings, blurred in shadow and light, hinted that every small effort in the face of chaos was an act of quiet hope, an understated achievement amid the vast, indifferent history of humanity. The fire endured not simply as a source of warmth, but as a symbol of humanity's gentle, persistent attempt to shape its fragile world, one small ember at a time. Under the soft glow of a dying fire, the small tribe watched as their cracked stone tools sat heated in the coals. The faint crackling sound blending with the whisper of the night, the idea that heat could change the very nature of their simple blades, was as slow and tentative as the flickering flames that danced over their hands. There was no grand proclamation, only quiet curiosity, almost embarrassed by its own significance, like a secret accidentally uncovered. The edges, once fragile and chipped, seemed to settle into a duller but more resilient shape, an unspoken reward for patience amid the flickering shadows. It was a modest breakthrough wrapped in the silence of their routine lives, yet it held the quiet promise of a future that might someday be more durable. As the tribe's understanding deepened, small experiments became routine. Placing more stone in the fire, waiting with cautious hope as the edges seemed to slightly harden, shimmering under the faint embers. Yet each success was a fragile achievement, fragile as the wood they carefully preserved and fought to keep from burning away entirely. Outside, predators lurked nearby, their distant growls blending with the sound of cracking branches, reminding the tribe that their world was both a gift and a threat. The fire, which once merely warmed, now became a catalyst of desperation, a race against dwindling resources and a hostile wilderness that was always waiting. Every flicker of flame seemed to whisper that mastery was a slow, uncertain craft, easily lost in the shadows of hunger and fear. Ironically, as their experiments with fire advanced into smelting ore, the human hands that once only chipped stone now nervously grasped at the unyielding mass of heated metal, the glow casting strange shadows over their faces. Smoldering embers gave way to sparks that promised change. Yet the process was clumsy, often forgotten amid the loud clatter of rocks and tools, or abandoned when the wood supply threatened to run out. The necessity of progress turned into a quiet irony. The very fire that once simply warmed had become a symbol of both hope and peril. Nearby, silent predators watched unbothered by the changing noise, their patience as unchanging as the dark sky, reminding the tribe that some threats only grew more cunning with time. The pursuit of better tools thus became a subtle dance between ingenuity, resource scarcity, and primal instinct for survival. With the fire now more than just a hearth, the tribe settled into a slow rhythm of tinkering and waiting. The glow became a steady companion in their daily routines. Worn hands and tired eyes observed the metal's faint shimmer, almost as if expecting it to reveal some deeper secret of the world, or perhaps their own small place within it. The relentless pressure of dwindling wood and the constant threat of predators offered a quiet calm that was almost reflective, as if they understood that mastery was a long, winding journey, not a single moment of victory. In those moments of subdued effort, there was a gentle acknowledgement of human imperfection, humility shadowed by the faint flicker of flames. The fires flickered not only in the night, but within their quiet minds, as they watched the slow, unhurried advance of their simple technology. Years later, the memory of the delicate dance between fire and stone lingered in the quiet corners of their histories, almost as an afterthought amid the small, unremarkable details of prehistoric life. Their faces, blurred in shadow and soft light, reflected a peaceful acceptance that progress, like the fire itself, was a slow and often invisible process. The pursuit of harder, more reliable tools had quietly altered their world, allowing them to shape metals and eventually more complex objects, though always at the cost of keeping the fire alive amid scarcity and danger. Perhaps it was not the grandness of achievement, but the gentle patience in these small steps that cast the real, enduring glow across generations. In the stillness of their modest fires, humanity found itself, quietly beginning to forge a future from sparks and faint hope. In the gentle hush of early evenings, a small group of humans sat around their warming hearth, watching the soft glow flicker against rough-hewn stones. The glow was steady enough to illuminate their faces, which wore expressions of quiet familiarity, touched by the mundane comfort of daily routine. They were beginners in the quiet art of controlling fire, proud yet cautious, aware of its warmth, but unaware of how deeply it would intertwine with their lives. The silent crackle and faint smoke were simple sounds, almost like an organic heartbeat shared across generations. It was during these unremarkable moments that they first learned that fire could become more than a flickering warmth. It could be a catalyst of change, of progress, quietly whispered through the shadows. One stormy night, dark clouds roiled overhead, rattling the bones of the land and threatening to snuff out their fragile fire. Amidst the howling wind and sudden bursts of rain, a rival clan saw their opportunity and launched a surprise raid. Their figures blurred against the storm's relentless tapestry. The fires in some neighboring hearths flickered, then faded, leaving only cold darkness behind. The intruders, armed with simple weapons, moved with practiced familiarity, their shadows flickering in the rain's relentless light. Now, the small community faced the real possibility that their newfound warmth and safety could be extinguished altogether. Just as the fire's promise to sustain them seemed most fragile and distant, in the midst of chaos, a young warrior named Lumen, with grit more than grace, seized an opportunity. Using newly forged spears, heated in the dying embers of their hearth and shields, darkened by sweat and rain, he and his companions turned their last refuge into an unlikely battlefield. As the enemy approached, Lumen's shield caught the shifting firelight, casting fleeting shadows across their tense faces. With a quiet irony, what was once merely a source of warmth now became a weapon, an extension of their will to survive. However imperfectly, the flames, once gentle and domestic, now burned fiercely in the service of protection, reaffirming that fire's true power was not in its warmth, but in its capacity to transform risk into resilience. Gradually, the storm subsided, and calm settled over the little group, who found themselves sitting amidst smoldering remains and cooling embers. The danger had passed, but the memory of the night's chaos lingered, etched into their minds like the patterns on worn leather. The warriors, eyes still shining with a mixture of exhaustion and relief, began to tend the fires anew, carefully rekindling the sparks into steady flames. There was a quiet acknowledgement that fire, once simply a tool of survival, had become a symbol, an unspoken reminder that their strength was rooted in their ability to adapt. As they settled into the slow rhythm of recovery, the faint crackle of their fires seemed to whisper that the true mastery was not in the flame itself, but in their quiet perseverance. As dawn broke softly over the horizon, the small community reflected in the warmth of their renewed fires, their faces touched with the weariness of another quiet chapter. The storm and raid had revealed the quiet irony of fire's influence, a humble spark capable of igniting both destruction and innovation. They understood more than ever that fire's true legacy was not only in warming their bodies, but in forging resilience and identity in the slow, imperfect process of human life. Behind their blurred faces and simple garments, there was no heroism, only a gentle acknowledgement of their shared, ordinary persistence. In their stillness, the fires burned quietly on, as unassuming witnesses to their ongoing, unremarkable survival. In the quiet, shadowed corners of the Paleolithic world, the Lumen people gathered near a rough-hewn cave, their flickering firelight barely touching the dark stone walls. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and dried wood, and their senses held the simple rhythm of gathering around the same humble glow. It was in these slow moments that the tribe's shaman, Aruk, quietly observed a sudden streak across the cloudy sky, a jagged line that rumbled loudly and struck a dry sapling nearby. The crackle and shower of sparks lit up the night just long enough for curious eyes to notice, igniting a faint sense of wonder and unease. To them, this unexpected flash seemed both familiar and extraordinary, a sign of nature's silent, distant power. And so, amidst the gentle hush, a strange idea began to seed itself. That fire might become something more than just a passing light, a flicker worth understanding amidst the slow march of human patience. As days turned into quiet nights, the tribe's curiosity grew quietly dense. They found themselves returning again and again to that same spot, hesitantly poking at glowing embers and trying to replicate the lightning's fleeting touch. Their hands brushed charcoal, left smudged and trembling, attempting to capture that quick burst of heat and light that had so startled them. The irony lingered. What once was a terrifying, unstoppable force now became a fragile pursuit, almost mundane in its persistence. They learned the rough texture of charcoal and how to coax a small flame from dry reeds and tinder. Yet the fire remained elusive, a delicate guest that refused to stay. Still, in the slow rhythm of patience, it became less a mystery delivered by nature and more a quiet, shared challenge. Humans trying to tame a moment that refused to be fully tamed. With each small success, there came a subtle shift, an ironic twist in their story. As they gathered around tiny, flickering flames, those little sparks seemed to mock their efforts, sparking both pride and gentle frustration. Sometimes, a careless breath would snuff out their fragile success, revealing that fire was neither as simple nor as predictable as it seemed in that flickering moment. The tribe's elders chuckled softly at their own clumsy attempts, faces shadowed and unreadable behind the dim glow, their blurred outlines hinting at years of quiet patience. It was, perhaps, a strange comedy, a race against the fleeting nature of sparks, a reminder that even the greatest human efforts can be humbled by the stubborn simplicity of fire. And yet, between the failures and chuckles, a quiet hope persisted. Over time, the people's lives grew gently intertwined with their newfound mastery over fire. It brought warmth, bound the cold night to their side, and rendered the dark less silent. They learned to gather dry wood carefully, to keep the flames alive through the long hours, and to pass the knowledge from hand to hand with a tender sense of duty. The glow of their fires was now a familiar, peaceful companion, calm and reassuring, like the slow breathing of the earth itself. In these moments, the human and the flame found a delicate harmony. The absurdity of their early struggles faded into a quiet, shared understanding. Fire was no longer a wild force, but an extension of their patience, persistence, and quiet irony. In the quiet dawn of human discovery, a small group of early humans wandered through a misty valley, their shadows flickering faintly in the early light. Among them, curiosity stirred as they noticed a dark, glowing ember, a tiny piece of smoldering coal left behind by a lightning strike. It was an incidental accident, yet it introduced a strange new element into their world: fire. Shifting shadows of fear and wonder danced on their faces as they gathered close, uncertain whether to fear this flicker or to embrace it. The ember's glow was a quiet, persistent invitation to look closer at this mysterious brightness that seemed both warm and dangerous, ordinary and uncanny. As days passed, the humans returned to the ember, their movements hesitant but increasingly familiar. They touched the warm surface cautiously, their fingers trembling at the contrast of heat and softness. Tension filled the air. Should they let fire touch their skins, or should they keep their distance? It was a fragile negotiation with this enigmatic force, which flickered in the night like a distant star brought very close. They debated in soft murmurs, their faces blurred with a faint mixture of apprehension and fascination, unaware that this small spark was about to change their survival story forever. Irony lingered in the way fire's danger was both feared and secretly yearned for. Eventually, the humans began to understand something subtle: that flame could be a friend as well as a threat. They discovered that warmth could preserve meat, and the strange, smoky aroma that rose from their fires brought comfort in cold times. They smoothed rough stones into rudimentary tools near the cozy glow, feeling a sense of humble achievement. Yet, they couldn't quite tame the unpredictability of the fire. It still crackled and hissed, constantly reminding them of its wild heart. Faces shaded in shadows or glowing faintly in the firelight seemed to blur and shift, like the uncertain boundary between danger and progress. The irony sat quietly in how they had gained warmth, but lost some innocence in their cautious mastery. Gradually, the flickering light became part of their everyday rhythm, a soft, steady pulse in the rhythm of their lives. They gathered around it during rest, sharing quiet moments that were neither hurried nor tense, but simply calm. The fire's glow illuminated the rough outlines of their faces, faintly expressive, mildly humorous in their sleepiness. It provided not only heat, but a sense of connection, a small anchor in their otherwise unpredictable existence. Through the gentle warmth, they learned patience and came to accept fire's slow, persistent presence, understanding that some mysteries are better revered than unraveled. In its silent comfort, life seemed to settle into a peaceful, if imperfect, rhythm. Looking back, the first spark was perhaps the most human of moments, an accidental gift that turned out to be something quietly profound. The humans' cautious dance with fire marked a subtle turning point, a slow acceptance that life's small innovations often come wrapped in uncertainty. The ember's glow reminded them that progress is neither grand nor dramatic, but often a quiet accumulation of patience and curiosity. They continued gathering around the fire, with faces now shaped by a new routine, neither afraid nor fully in control, just observing the slow, steady hum of change. And in this understated evolution, they found a quiet dignity that would quietly carry forward through generations. In a quiet, foggy valley long ago, Aki, a simple hunter-gatherer, brushed against something warm and unusual as he gathered sticks near a small fire pit. The ember glowed faintly, casting a soft amber light that flickered through the morning mist. Curiosity sparked in his tired eyes, and he carefully poked it with a stick, feeling a gentle warmth seep through his rough hands. The others in the tribe soon noticed the strange glow and gathered slowly, their faces a mixture of suspicion and wonder. In the silence of that early day, the first flicker of a new shared experience flickered into existence. It was neither loud nor extraordinary, just a small, flickering ember that seemed almost tired itself, yet quietly promising something more. Over the next few days, the tribe returned to the same spot, drawn by a strange comfort in the flickering light. Some kept watch, eyes fixed on the ember's slow glow, while others hesitated, fearing the unknown warmth that prickled their skin. The wind carried faint crackles and whispers of fear or fascination in their minds. Ironically, the ember remained silent, stubbornly ordinary in a sea of human uncertainty. They poked and fanned it, trying to understand it, but it simply sat there, unhurried, as if it knew nothing of the importance it was gradually gathering. Here, amid the quiet tension, a faint humor emerged. Humans increasingly fussed over a tiny, flickering source of heat, like a new, but somewhat reluctant friend. One evening, a younger member of the tribe, more daring than the rest, leaned close and reached out to touch the ember, startled by its gentle heat, but relieved to find it was safe. Laughter, slow and slightly hoarse, rippled through the gathered figures, breaking the uneasy silence. The ember, unmoving and unjudging, still flickered in the dusk, as if amused at human fuss. They joked about it being a tiny sun they could hold in their hands, a joke that lingered in the calm like a shared secret. The flicker seemed less threatening now, more like a stubborn little friend who simply refused to go out. Amidst the quiet, the tribe was quietly beginning to see the ember as something more, something that could bring them together without necessarily demanding much. As nights stretched on, the ember sat in the center of their small circle, becoming a fixture of their gatherings. Sitting around it, the tribe shared stories of their days, their faces softened in the warm glow, slowly shedding the earlier doubts. The simple act of gathering around this silent glow fostered a gentle rhythm. Talk, pause, look into the fire, and listen to the faint sounds of the world outside. The ember, always quietly flickering, seemed to settle into its new role as a subtle anchor, quietly tying them closer without grand gestures or promises. They found a calm stability in this common stillness, a faint humor in how something so tiny could carry such weight for human connection, even if those connections sometimes felt fragile or unspoken. Looking back, the tribe might have remembered that first ember as an insignificant spark, but in truth, it was something quietly profound, a reminder that for humans, even a faint flicker of warmth could serve as a gentle reminder of coexistence. It wasn't about fire as a gift of power or survival. Rather, it was that subtle, unassuming thing, a small, tired ember that showed how fragile bonds might gather around the simplest of things. As they watched the gentle glow fade into the comfort of night, a kind, sleepy acknowledgement settled. These tiny moments, mundane yet meaningful, quietly shaped what it meant to be human. In the quiet rhythm of their lives, the ember's gentle light wove its way into the fabric of shared existence, slow as a heartbeat, soft as a whisper. In the quiet dawn of humanity's days, a small spark flickered and settled on dry leaves, an unintentional gift from the gods of chance. The first fire was nothing more than a warm glow, unnoticed by many, yet profoundly reassuring to those who saw it. As fingers brushed against the rough stone or softened animal fat, the humans began to understand the subtle magic of heat, an ordinary miracle that changed their lives in ways they could barely comprehend. The initial fear of fire slowly gave way to curiosity, and then to careful experimentation, each ember becoming a tiny symbol of potential. It was an unremarkable beginning, Yet it quietly set in motion a series of transformations that would shape entire ways of life. Over time, small groups learned to tame their flames and share their knowledge with others, a slow spreading of this gentle light across the landscape. Some clans guarded their fires secret like a fragile treasure, cautious of outsiders, while others, more generous or perhaps more tired of hiding, traded embers in the shadows of twilight. With each sharing, the fire's glow grew steadier, and the tools crafted near its warmth became sharper, more durable tin blades, stone axes, and carved bones. Yet, amidst this gradual progress, the irony lingered. The most sacred innovation was simply a flickering ember, something so ordinary it refused to be celebrated. And yet, everything depended on it. Life's small, overlooked sparks began to ripple outward, quietly stitching new patterns into their collective story. As generations passed, the stories of the first spark blurred into myth, a whisper of a time when light emerged from chaos. The faces of their ancestors grew shadowed, their figures softened into outlines that flickered like dying firelight. Still, the ironies persisted. The flickering flame that once seemed so fragile had become the foundation of entire societies. The humble ember gave rise not only to tools, but to rituals, to the very idea of progress. Yet the new fires kindled in villages, and camps burned not just for warmth, but for pride, for identity, though nobody truly remembered who sparked the myth. It remained as a quiet reminder that all greatness begins with a small, unnoticed glow in the darkness. Peace slowly enveloped their nightly gatherings, and the fire's gentle glow became a familiar, almost mundane comfort. People leaned close, hands curled around stone bowls, eyes reflecting the branching shadows. The stories of that first spark were told less with wonder, more with gentle nostalgia, like tracing a scar that no longer aches, but reminds one of endurance. The embers cooled at season's end, yet the quiet hum of remembrance persisted beneath the surface of daily life. The fire had become a silent partner in their slow, imperfect progress, a symbol not of unquestioned triumph, but of shared vulnerability. And in this stillness, they found their way forward, aware of time's steady passing and the simple faith in ordinary sparks. Now, centuries later, the flicker of that first ember is just a faint whisper in the collective memory. It lingers, not as a miracle, but as a modest truth. The humble fire did not forge an empire overnight. It quietly shaped their tools, their communities, and their stories, one small spark at a time. It reminds us that human progress is often an understated affair, an accumulation of mundane acts and silent shared needs. The faces behind the flames are blurred, their motives simple, their moments fleeting. Yet, as we reflect in the calm of this distant past, there is comfort in knowing that the entire edifice of civilization might still rest on the glow of something as unassuming as a tiny, forgotten spark. It is, after all, the light that endures in human patience and quiet persistence. Later in the day, as the tribe went about their routines, the smoke from the fire wove a somber ribbon into the afternoon air, curling gently above their huts. They chuckled quietly at their own dependence, how they lifted stones, carved wood, and gathered herbs, all in the shadow of this glowing core. Sometimes a piece of wood would fall into the fire, sputtering and sending a brief cascade of sparks into the sky. A tiny, amusing rebellion against their careful order. The irony was clear. A tool so vital also relied on such delicate, imperfect effort. A single ember could vanish or flare up unpredictably. Still, amidst their mundanity, they understood this dance with fire was their best defense against the chaos beyond. The fire had become both their protector and their constant, patient teacher, as centuries unfurled in slow, unchanging patterns. The continuous ember glow became a calm fixture in the background of human existence. Fires burned in hearths and campsites, their light a soft, amber blanket during long evenings. People fussed with stones, cracked twigs, and charred wood, their movements slow and familiar, an unspoken, steady routine that subtly bound generations together. In these peaceful, mundane moments, the story of the first spark drifted into the realm of myth, a gentle reminder of a humble beginning that was neither grand nor pivotal, merely an ordinary act of staying warm amid the quiet chaos of life. The fire endured, quietly knitting time into a gentle, familiar rhythm. Looking back, the story of that first spark feels like a gentle murmur, an old human tale about the patience in seeking what is often just beyond reach. Beneath the glow of countless fires, the Lumen people reflected in their sleepy, weathered faces that every small victory, every spark captured and cherished, was a step toward the quiet, everyday magic of survival. They had learned that mastery did not come from grand gestures, but from the soft persistence of small, imperfect attempts at capturing light. These moments, simple and slight, became woven into the slow, ongoing story of human life, an understated reminder that even the most basic tools carry the weight of history, patience, and gentle humor. And somewhere deep within, perhaps, the blurred faces knew well that fire's true power was in the quiet warmth it brought to their long, wandering nights.